So when it comes to actually making it more difficult as you're adapting through this nervous system phase, there's a couple of options. Most often the people that come in here and people that go into average gyms default to just making it heavier as the only possible way to make something more challenging. That is honestly, in my opinion, and in the way that we do things in here, one of the last things that you should be going to is, man, I can make that heavier and I can do more of it. That's not usually the first thing you should go to. There's a lot of ways to make things more challenging before you increase the load or the resistance on the exercise. One of those ways is to increase the time spent under tension. So when it comes down to it, as I've talked about in some of the other videos you've watched by now, reps, what people usually do when they count how many times they're going back and forth on a machine, are really just a very poor, very imprecise measurement of what's called time under tension. How much time the muscles spend under tension is really the language that they speak. They have no idea whatsoever whether you did 4 or 5 or 7 or 12. They might know whether you did one really, really heavy, hard 1 rep max or whether you did 25 reps, but anything in between that really, they don't know the difference. They really just know how hard they've been working and for how long they have been working. So in general, when I'm training people and what my preference would be in terms of progressing the load and the challenge on the machines is if you're going from doing an exercise for about 30 seconds with, let's call it 20 pounds on it, whatever it might be, instead of going straight up to, let's go to 25 pounds, which is satisfying, I understand, to put more weight on something. Instead of just increasing the resistance level, what you should try to do is increase the time spent under tension. So if you were previously doing 20 pounds for 30 seconds for a week or so, and you feel like it's getting a little bit easy for you, the next thing to do would say, I'm gonna keep the weight the same, but I'm gonna go up to 45 seconds. And I'm now gonna perform this same exact exercise for longer. And then when you get to 45 seconds, you bump it up to 50, 55, 60 seconds. Once you get up to being able to accomplish and execute that exercise properly for 60 seconds, that's a good time to then say, okay, now we're gonna go back to 30 seconds, but we're gonna increase the weight a little bit. Then with that same weight, you go from being able to do it from 30 seconds to 40 seconds to 50 seconds to 60 seconds, upon which you then go back to 30 seconds and increase the weight again. So you're not just increasing how much weight you're moving around, but you're increasing the time spent working on the part of these muscles, going from 30 seconds up to 60 seconds in a safe manner with the same weight. Then once you get to 60 seconds, it's like, am I really gonna sit here for a minute and a half or 2 minutes doing this same weight? At which point you back the weight, you back the time back down to 30 seconds, and then you increase your weight. That is ultimately my favorite way to end up progressing with the weights over time, is just adding some time under tension till it gets to be kind of difficult to focus on the execution essentials for that long, honestly. Then you go back down in time and up in weight. Another way that you can progress and make the challenge still challenging to you is you can up the weight. If you're doing something for 30 seconds with a certain weight, let's call it 20 pounds, and you don't want to do the increasing the time thing, maybe you think it's cumbersome to time yourself or whatever, I've heard that from several people, you can just keep the time spent under tension the same, let's call it 30 seconds, but just increase the weight. Go up in weight by 10, 15%, something along those lines, and continue to keep the time under tension spent the same, but increase the overall load. This is especially a good way to go if you have joint issues in whatever that exercise is, and instead of spending more time under tension and doing more reps across that time with the same weight, you can keep the time under tension the same, but increase the resistance over time. Ultimately, the most important thing that I need you to understand when it comes to progression in here is before you even think about increasing weight, or before you think about increasing the time under tension, or before you even get close to spending more time in one workout, doing more sets on one set of muscles and getting more targeted, you must make absolutely sure as best you can that you are performing all of the exercises in accordance with all 6 of the execution essentials. I've already had several people in here over the first month come in for their monthly refreshing session and say that they've been increasing their weights a ton, and I watch them do the exercise and the setup's not correct, the intention is not correct, they're not contracting the right muscle groups, the tempo is way too fast, they're using too much range of motion, they're doing more reps and more weight, more quantity, but not focusing on the quality. So once you get a true full understanding of all of the execution essentials, and need to watch the videos as many times as you need to understand them, also understanding that they'll never ever run on autopilot ever for anybody, not even me. Happened to me this morning. I bailed on a set when I was thinking about a soccer game that was on. But unless you're making sure you're participating in the exercise with all of those executed to the highest level, you should not be increasing the weight or increasing the time or anything. You spend the first month or two in here really getting focused on, am I using the right tempo? Am I contracting the right muscle groups? Am I initiating with them and then intending to move my body as opposed to moving the machine? Am I using the proper range of motion? Ironically, what happens most often is people will not focus on those thinking they should be increasing the weight because I've talked about this nervous system adaptation phase, and they'll start adding more weight when their body's not ready to handle that more weight because they're not truly challenging their nervous system to actually use the muscles that they need in order for it to adapt, to get stronger and better at using those muscles. So the ironic thing is, a lot of times people increase the weight or increase the volume or try to progress it too much without focusing on the essentials, meaning they're not ready to actually do those, to actually increase those things. But if you really buckle down and focus on all of them all of the time, every time you're in here on every exercise, every single fraction of a centimeter on every exercise, that's when your weights will go up a whole bunch. So if you really get nailed down on those and fully understand them, and every single little piece of every repetition you're thinking about the right tempo, the right contraction, am I intending on moving my body, that's when your weights will skyrocket. So it's kind of a catch-22 in that often people just increase the weights thinking they've been doing it and the nervous system is adapting, but if you're not focusing on the execution essentials, it will not adapt and you will not be ready for more weight. So when it comes to progression, especially the first few months in here, really focus on executing the exercises with the highest possible level of quality. And then you'll start noticing, man, I did this yesterday with this same weight and I'm really focusing all these essentials and now it feels kind of easy. That's when you go up, not because you've been doing the same weight for a few days so you think you should go up. It should really feel to you, this really isn't that challenging anymore when I'm focusing on all of these things. It's not challenging because now you're tossing the weights back and forth or you're letting your pelvis fly back on the trunk rotation or something because you're breaking the setups and the intentions and the initiations and all the things that we've set into place. It's getting easy because you've been focusing on all of those things, meaning these things are getting so much better at working together to do the thing that you're asking it to do that actually you now need more challenge for them to continue to get better at that. So really focusing on the execution essentials every single time you're in here on everything is what will cause the nervous system adaptation to take place faster, which will cause your weights to need to be harder. So if you're getting on a machine and the weight still feels challenging, you should probably keep the weight the same and really focus on all of the execution essentials. It's when you've been focusing on them intensely on everything, and then all of a sudden, that weight that you've been using no longer feels challenging in that same exercise. That's when you start to increase the weight or you increase the amount of time spent under tension with the same weight. Progression can be kind of tricky, but that's what those execution essentials are in place for, because if you really focus and hone in on those and apply them to everything, you'll start to notice that you need to progress the weight or you need to progress the time in order to maintain the same level of challenge inside of your body.